Hello, everybody. I'm Robert Douglas, and this is Deploy Friday. It's time to finish coding, send that stuff off to the cloud. It's the best day to deploy your application, better than every other day of the week. And we're going to talk about headless e-commerce. I have two incredible guests with me today. Anastasia Spilak.
Good job.
Practice. And Ryan Shrama. And if anybody out there thinks they can do better with either of these two last names, I invite you to come on the show and you can just practice saying them yourselves. So I'm going to give each of my guests a chance to introduce themselves and set the record straight on how you pronounce or don't pronounce their last name, and also kind of where you're from in terms of your company and where you're located even. It's interesting. And then we'll talk about headless e-commerce. Anastasia, go ahead. Who are you?
Thank you, Robert. And my surname is pronounced Spilak, so you did pretty good. And I'm a product marketing manager at Strapi. Strapi is an open source, headless, Node.js-based CMS. And I'm based in Paris, but originally I'm from Ukraine. Thus the complicated surname.
Great. Yes. Okay. Thank you, Anastasia. And Ryan, what's your excuse?
Well, I just kind of had nothing better to do with my time, so I thought I'd start an open source commerce project.
And what's that called?
Ryan Shrama, the creator of Drupal Commerce. Before that, Uber Carts. These are the kind of dominant e-commerce plugins for the Drupal open source content management system. And we really basically like natively extend the data model of Drupal so that all of the things it does for content management, like extensible data structures, views, database querying, the whole nine yards, workflow, content moderation, all of that applies equally to your commerce data. And so you basically can run Drupal Commerce full stack, meaning just a traditional CMS implementation with the modules turned on and themed. Or what we've been doing more and more for our clients is run it headless. So you basically have a custom backend, and then either bring your own front-end team or hire a front-end team to build the React or Vue or whatever application in front of it. So in a sense, really similar to Strapi, but based on PHP instead of JavaScript.
Right. Although if you have been paying attention to Pierre's, the CEO's of Strapi's feed, you will have read that on April 1st, they actually rewrote Strapi in PHP. I took note.
Yeah.
Ryan, what's your company's name, Ryan?
Yep. Company is Centarro. We're a distributed team. I'm kind of where the headquarters is where I am. I'm outside of Greenville, South Carolina, gazing out at the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains all day, wishing I was hiking instead of sitting at my desk. But the company is spread from Salt Lake City, Utah to Tel Aviv, Israel, and everywhere in between, and a bit down south to Brazil. And, just a diverse group of folks who have been working in Drupal for the last 10 to 15 years and love hacking on e-commerce projects.
Awesome. And I forgot to put the banner up for strapi.io in case anybody out there wants to go visit that. And also to the audience who's watching live, thank you for being here. And the questions that you have for these two around the topic that we're discussing, you can put those into whatever chat that you're using. If it's YouTube or if it's Facebook or if it's Twitter, just use the chat there and we'll see your questions and bring them up in real time. All right. So let's set the stage here. It's an interesting show because we're talking about headless e-commerce, but I've got people from two what are essentially CMS systems, which is was a deliberate decision to approach this topic. But the two systems are, in fact, divergent in their history. And Ryan, you alluded to that a bit, that Drupal commerce is either full stack or headless, and that comes from the fact that Drupal primarily is a full stack application, meaning it's responsible for both the content management and in this case the e-commerce management, but also the presentation layer. It generates the HTML that flies out to the browser. And it's kind of an evolution of Drupal that they've done pretty gracefully to move into the world of headless, where you can have the e-commerce and the content management happen in a backend system that customers don't actually access, but then the presentation layer happen in like Vue or React.js and be pushed out separately. So I wanted to just set that grand stage for everybody listening, because that really frames our conversation So we're going to ask some questions like why headless? And it's interesting. I'd like actually, Ryan, you to take a stab at that first and then move to Anastasia, because that's historically also accurate, right? Like Drupal made the decision to do that kind of reactively to where the market's going, but Strapi came out of the gates as a pure headless player. So why headless, Ryan?
Okay. So I'm going to speak directly to our experience and then acknowledge a rationale that hasn't necessarily been our deciding factor, but is commonly brought up. So first of all, our direct experience when we started taking customers headless was when they needed to do so for reasons of scale. So when you're dealing with a full stack PHP application, especially pre-Symfony, Drupal 7 and 6 and whatnot, you can only get so far full stack, especially when you start talking about authenticated users logging into Drupal, bypassing a lot of the caching mechanisms that Drupal 7 and previous had. You couldn't support the scale that our most demanding customers needed. And our classic case study is a company called MatSmart, who also operates on platform.sh dedicated as of 2 months ago. Woo. Ding, ding, ding. They just were doing great. They started on Drupal full stack because they had a Drupal developer as one of the founders of the company. And year over year, their growth was tremendous, up to tens of millions of dollars a year, thousands of orders an hour. And when Drupal Commerce, this was on Drupal 7 at the time, could no longer keep up, they approached us and said, help us audit this application and help us figure out how to get more juice out of it. And we realized there's just a handful of common places in Drupal that really start to bog down, talking about the forms API, which stuffs anything and everything in the form cache. So you have this database table that bloats to gigabytes and gigabytes of just useless form data from all of the forms that it's rendering on the site, whether that data is needed or not. All right, so you get some database bloat. But then you also just have slow rendering when you start to use Drupal's views module, which is the primary module that lets you query the database and then render the query results however you want to. And so we had to get Drupal out of the way with respect to forms, content listings, and order listings, things like that. And so we started progressively decoupling. And so it really was about scalability, about performance, about concurrent users. And eventually we went fully headless with them once we had matured their backend APIs to the point that they literally could just swap out in Drupal on the front end for React. And now they have just a full React application on the front end. They now use that same front end for multiple territories, expanding into new countries, even completely different branded sites with one common backend engine powering it all. So headless was about scale. It was a little bit about internationalization and expansion, but then also, of course, customer experience matters. And it's just a lot easier if you start with React full bore from the get-go and let that provide the front-end customer experience. You can just do more. It's nicer, it's faster, it's more responsive. It's more modern feeling than the old Drupal Ajax throbber, sitting there telling you something's about to happen and eventually it does. And a good example of that here recently was working with one of the largest research universities, perhaps in the Atlanta area, to improve their donation portal. They just wanted a more modern customer experience. And so decoupling for them was about achieving that customer experience as much as it was about achieving any sort of scalability or performance concerns.
Great, thank you. Awesome answer. And Anastasia, then let's move to Strapi and talk about the philosophy there behind Strapi as a headless CMS, and then maybe bring that relevant to the e-commerce experience.
Yeah, of course. So as you have already mentioned, Strapi was founded a bit later in 2016. And initially it was created and designed and developed as a headless CMS. It's never been a monolithic architecture, but headless from the beginning. And the founders, as they are developers by themselves, they really wanted to give other developers this great experience of being able to integrate their own tools, being able to choose their own stack, and give them real freedom on what they want to do with the front end. And as a marketer, I want to also have this bit of a marketing perspective of why headless e-commerce becoming is so popular. Well, first of all, the way people buy online is changing, and thanks to COVID especially, more and more purchases are happening online, and customers are becoming more and more demanding. And there is some data by some research universities who say that 40% of shoppers, for example, will abandon a website that takes longer than 3 seconds to load. So this is relevant to performance, and quite often websites with monolithic e-commerce architecture, they may get slow. Also, a lot of people want a personalized shopping experience, which sometimes can be quite limiting with traditional systems, which is why people implement headless e-commerce to be able to deliver literally anything on the front end. One more reason is the way that more and more people are buying online or are using voice assistants or Internet of Things, smart cars, smart fridges. Maybe they are in the future, but mobile is already here, and customers and companies just want to deliver omnichannel experiences, which is why headless is much more practical, because you have one source of content, and through API you can deliver it to as many front ends as you wish, and you can develop all kinds of new applications, which is also future-proof, because if a new technology emerges, it's just much easier to create a new front end and deliver content to a new store. In Strapi, we have an interesting use case. A customer was delivering content to an ATM machine, which I find quite interesting. It says a lot about the world that's evolving, and people just want to give this efficiency to marketing team and content editors.
So what was the ATM machine reading? The Daily News?
Yeah.
Financial Times?
Yeah.
Well, so was Strapi on the ATM? Like was it actually running on a computer in the ATM, or was it just like Strapi's on the cloud and then they're just consuming it from the ATM? I don't actually know your model there.
It's just serving the data and the content to the ATM. Yeah.
So I'm glad you brought up the model there, Ryan, because I want to probe in on Strapi a little bit more, because I am less familiar with it as a system than I am Drupal Commerce, having that as my primary background. So Anastasia, as I understand it, Strapi is focused on content management in general. You can make your own content types. You can expose APIs for querying that, set up rules, access control. What are the actual tools that are provided by Strapi that make it geared towards e-commerce? What are the things that you get out of the box?
Sure. Well, you can set up your content architecture as you want. It's completely up to a person who is creating an app, how to build it and how to design it and how to integrate it with other tools. So Strapi can be used as one CMS for an e-commerce project, or connected to another e-commerce platform like Headless Shopify or more modern e-commerce tools. This is the first use case when Strapi is used as the main e-commerce CMS. You can build out the whole functionality and deliver the product content, deliver the blog, the marketing content on your platform. You can integrate it with some payment services, and this way your e-commerce platform will function. And most of small e-shops, they actually use this model. If you want to integrate it with other tools, you can as well serve a part of content from Strapi and serve another part of content, for example, information about stock, about products, about different codes of the items from another e-commerce platform, while Strapi can be responsible for the blog, the landing pages, and the other marketing-oriented assets. It also can be integrated with payment tools like Snipcart or Stripe, etc.
Okay, so if I understand correctly, you see Strapi's role is primarily to curate the marketing content, the graphical assets, the textual descriptions around a product.
Did we lose Rob?
Yeah.
We can keep it going, because I actually had that same question. So there's a sense in which you could have a Drupal commerce. Oh, sorry, you glitched, and so we just kept going. But
everybody was gone for me. You're back.
There's a sense in which you could have Strapi running side by side, even with a Drupal commerce powered API. I mean, like you could theoretically have one React app consuming content from Strapi and e-commerce data from Drupal Commerce even. Is that what I'm understanding? Like how you go side by side with other platforms?
I believe it is possible. I haven't heard of such use case in particular, but I know that there are a lot of cases when it's running with Shopify, for example.
Okay, yeah.
Shopify
But it would
Headless.
still be a separate front end. Like it would be a React front end with Shopify in the background and Strapi in the background, and then, all right.
Yeah.
And Ryan, to then come back to the Centarro Drupal commerce model a little bit more. How much work is involved if you want to have Drupal commerce power a complete experience for a customer, including the checkout and everything, all in the React layer or Vue layer?
Yeah. You can do one of two things right now. So again, just to recap, like Drupal obviously is your content management system. So all of your content, taxonomy, internationalization, content moderation, files, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It has a REST API module out of the box, JSON API based. So you can just consume any of your content, and Drupal Commerce then adds your orders, order items, products, product variations, the whole 9 yards. Also international, also multi-currency, translatable, et cetera, et cetera. And then you have your application at the front end that's basically doing user authentication from the Drupal resource, maybe hitting a search resource that queries the product catalog to show some facet of the product catalog. We then render a product page with all the variations and the attribute selectors, and we facilitate some of the sort of on-page automatic updates of fields, prices, whatever, as different variations are being selected. But then once you get to checkout, that's the big question. Easy enough to query the cart resource and say, give me the cart, give me the order items, and then render that in the browser. But what do you do for checkout when the Drupal checkout form configuration is kind of built around the Drupal Forms API? And there is no just magic flip a switch and have a React app consume a form API array and render me a form that looks like that. And so I'd say you have one of two options today. We have one customer that basically has an instance of Drupal Commerce behind multiple different front-end sites for different brands in their portfolio, if you will. They're a Fortune 50 company for different brands and different markets. They'll just embed these Drupal Commerce widgets, or Centarro Commerce widgets, we called it, in their front-end sites. And when you get to checkout, we actually just have them embed the full stack checkout form in an iframe. And they just have the option to recolor it, skin it, whatever. That was the simplest way for them to just have checkout appear in headless fashion, but it is just full stack Drupal. So in a sense, it's kind of like building for them a private Shopify where they can have all of these different brands that use JavaScript to embed the widgets they want to for the different brands and different markets. But when it comes time to check out, you're just going, in a sense, to a standardized checkout form, much like Shopify will kick you out to, checkout.shop, whatever, I don't know the precise URL, but beardbrand.checkout.shopify.com or whatever it is. Not to plug Beard Brand too hard, but they are an excellent company. I highly recommend it. And so that's one thing, but it's still a pretty big lift. We don't have prefab components, say for React, that would just read that Drupal form config and then prepare a checkout form for you. So with the university project, we just had to build a custom React app to prepare that checkout form. And then the best that we were able to do was to say, okay, well, we can enrich our order resource with the API keys and tokens that you need to embed, say, the Braintree drop-in UI. So this is an API that Braintree offers that really simplifies headless checkout, because it's just a single JavaScript widget, but you need a transient token. You need some token that says, yes, this is a legitimate instance of my payment gateway account here. And so we just started adding that to the order resource, pre-generating the token. So when you get to the order, you also get the tokens and things that you need to prepare the payment widget if all you needed was payment. But the more complex checkout gets, obviously, the more custom work you're going to do on the front end. For example, at the university, they wanted donor profiles. What cause are you giving to? Is it specifically a line item for this? Is it a corporate donation? All of that stuff They just had to build
gift
custom
wrap,
React components.
gift message.
Fun aside. When you buy stuff from Amazon, you should always check this is a gift, even if it's for yourself, and just write yourself a very pleasant message. I love getting stuff from Amazon because they always have something flattering to say about me when I open my package. So, a little self-care.
Ryan explains how he moves through life as such a happy-looking person. It's all about beard care and
Tresemme shampoo. Yeah. I literally I probably have gift receipts laying all over my office. Ryan, keep rocking for the kids. So highly recommended. Anyway, so still a decent lift, but I'd be curious to know, like, what does the Strapi ecosystem have something that simplifies that? Like you mentioned Snipcart, for example. We actually have a great case study where somebody built their Drupal Commerce 2 powered API and then put Snipcart in front of it. And this was back when I think Snipcart was maybe still more open. It seems more oriented around proprietary drop-in payment widget now. I don't know how that's morphed, but Anastasia, what do y'all do for, like, here's a simple way to build a checkout?
Well, what is great about open source solutions is that you can have the access to code and integrate it with basically anything. And that's why quite often it's integrated with Stripe or Snipcart, right, or it can work with any other solutions. But from what I've experienced from our case studies, Stripe is one of the most popular ones. And you can also find starters on our website, which allow you to have ready-made content architecture and the front end with Next and Next, I believe. And it's a good start for an e-commerce project. Yeah.
And as a marketer in this field, how often do you get people asking about Jamstack? Is that a word that comes in through the front door quite often and you have to talk about it, or do you market towards that? And if so, how?
In the developer world, of course, it is. It is a big deal. In the more of a marketer or content editor world, I think it is less important. Basically, for marketing folks, the most important thing is the result. They don't really care what tech stack exactly is used, what kind of excellent architecture is built, as long as it brings good results, good performance, good KPIs, and good revenue, it is great. So basically, the CDOs and the developer teams are making all the decisions about the stack. And when we market towards this audience, of course, we talk a lot about the Jamstack ecosystem. And sometimes I even hear the Jamstack architecture e-commerce. So this is going even further than headless e-commerce, in the way that all the things are separate and very modular. But I believe a technical person would have more insights on this point. But indeed, when I just started to work in a tech industry, I thought Jamstack had something to do with cooking. Nice. Yes, it is quite a big deal right now. And yeah, everybody loves the static sites and integrations with static site generators.
Great. And you've mentioned case studies a couple times. Do you want to talk through any of the case studies that you have published or unpublished that highlight the way that people are actually using Strapi and e-commerce in the field?
Yeah, sure. One of our, actually, it was quite an early customer, is Mug & Snug, who have developed an e-commerce site using Strapi, and I believe they only used Strapi as a CMS and no other e-commerce platform. So if you want to see the case study for our viewers, it's on strapi.io/user stories. So in their tech stack, just a second, they have used, if I'm not mistaken, about the tech stack for the platform. Yeah, thanks. Yeah. So the project is they wanted to build a small e-commerce store that would let people sell their own design objects and creations. And they have used Strapi as a CMS and Next.js for frontend, and used Netlify CDN. And they were extremely excited by the level of flexibility that it gives to them, in a way that they could spin up their own architecture and then develop their own creative front end, and it was much faster than using a monolithic architecture. And for payment, I think they integrated Stripe, if I'm not mistaken. So they also love the freedom of being able to choose their own tools, and also the freedom to self-host, because there are a lot of great CMSs, headless CMSs out there, which are already hosted, and you have basically no control over where your data is stored. But with Strapi, you can choose where to deploy your data. Platform SH, we have a great partnership, for example. So this is something they appreciated a lot.
Great. So actually, Netlify CMS, so they are full Jamstack. I mean, Netlify created the term Jamstack. So if they're deploying an entire e-commerce experience using Strapi, only Strapi, Netlify, and Stripe, that's pretty spectacular. It probably loads really fast too, I'd imagine.
Yeah, it does.
Which is nice. It goes back to your point about the speed of rendering and loading being critical to e-commerce expectations. But I imagine that the actual e-commerce experience must be fairly simple in that case, just based on some of the limitations that Ryan mentioned. So I mean, it's just like you see this thing on the page, let's buy it, boom, right? Like that's kind of like the baseline experience. Can you tell us any more about how Strapi is used with the Shopify experience and how the two of those work together? Because you mentioned that, and I also saw a video when I was looking around about that. So I know it's a thing. I know people are doing it. What are your cases on that?
And is there anything bad you can say about Shopify? Feel free. It's good.
Right. Ryan will send you beard care products if you say bad things about Shopify.
Can I buy it in the online store that you built? Yeah, sure. If anyone is interested on how Strapi works with Shopify, basically a step-by-step instruction, there is a video on our YouTube where our one of the founders, Jim, he explains how to connect it. And indeed, using webhooks, all the two platforms can be interconnected. So this way you can get all the data, which is in your e-commerce platform, which is Shopify, can be at the same time connected to Strapi, and through the API layer, everything is delivered to a front end of your choice. That's as technical as I can get, since I'm not a dev. But
Sure.
The benefits of this having two separate CMSs is that indeed e-commerce CMSs, they were built for this purpose, and sometimes it may be more convenient to have all the order data, customer data, and stock data in this platform and manage all the marketing related content in a CMS like Strapi. But it doesn't mean that you cannot have everything in a regular CMS like Strapi or Drupal or any other headless CMS.
So if I understand the use case that you just gave, if I were a customer thinking through this, then what I would be looking for is a mobile first experience, React, with a fast website if they're on desktop. And I want a really content rich experience, more than Shopify can offer me with their plugins, or maybe their CMS plugins are so expensive I'm not interested. But I really like the simplicity of Shopify's e-commerce, infrastructure, which has to be said, it works. It's very straightforward. So I combine the two to enhance Shopify's content presentation layer with Strapi's content. But Shopify.
Shopify.
Okay,
Sorry,
Ryan, Ryan, you want to go on record saying that very loudly? Ryan, Shopify's presentation layer. What was the word you used?
Am I allowed to say sex on this live? Is this a G or PG? I can't. It's just not
it
as we
depends
all know,
on how many Shopify people are watching right now.
Yeah.
That's why the point is to use the headless Shopify to avoid the presentation layer, but to use the application layer. And what's also quite important for e-commerce clients is to be able to test and deliver new pages really quickly. And it can be a challenge with the traditional monolithic solutions, because let's say there is a sale coming up and you need to roll out a new page, a new campaign, handle a big spike of traffic as well, which is a catastrophe if a site crashes. You lose a lot of visitors and a lot of orders being done. So that's why e-commerce clients, they do have a lot of requirements on performance specifically. And the example I can give is not really an e-commerce client, it's a media, and they host almost 1 million articles on a Strapi website. So far, it works well, the performance, but at the time, we were not even aware that it was possible to host this big amount of data on Strapi. Yeah.
Nice, good case.
Yeah.
So I have a question. Ryan, did you want to add something before I move on?
Well, I was just going to say, so what's great about Shopify is that they just put out a 3-part blog series that helps you, the developer, learn how to get around their arbitrary and regressive API rate limits. Strapi may not be the problem, but you may have to strategize how to get around the API rate limiting that Shopify gives you by default. These are really nice articles about how to overcome the shortcomings in Shopify's API. It's great.
We'll do a whole nother series, Ryan, with you and some of the Shopify people, and you can duke it out. I'll just bring popcorn.
That'd be awesome.
Good thing it's remote.
Good thing it's remote, exactly.
So, we all know they'd eat my lunch too for Drupal's own shortcomings. So.
Software is nothing but a collection of compromises. It's
exactly.
True. So I have a question though, because my observation is that we're now several years into the headless gold rush. Okay, it's been quite a while since it was predicted, and the early adopters have started, and now the market's actually starting to solidify and mature a little bit. And what I've observed, and I want both of your observations on this, is that in the headless world, what we're actually seeing is a bunch of people, organizations, companies, development groups saying, thank God we don't have to do any more of that back end stuff. And it's all going to hosted SaaS solutions. I talked to dozens of new headless CMS and headless e-commerce companies every year. And I really mean dozens. They're just coming out of the woodwork, and there's venture capital money for all of them. And they're all SaaS. Okay, it's all SaaS. Strapi is really an outlier, and Centarro is old guard. Okay, am I crazy? Am I missing it, or are people just dropping backend altogether?
Well, people like easy solutions.
Yeah.
SaaS platforms are popular because you don't need to think about where am I going to host it. It's just ready-made. You just register and you have the access to it and you pay for the hosting. It has its own limitation though, especially for companies that care about their data privacy, and they usually decide to self-host. And we have a lot of big customers like this, especially from finance, who want a self-hosted solution. And
healthcare as well. Yeah.
Healthcare as well. Yeah. Government organization, especially, it is important for them. And also it's more control over the cost. So it gives you more control overall. And speaking about backend, and it is true that for front-end developers, quite often they use headless CMSs as an API framework. And at first, just first creation of Strapi, it wasn't really a CMS rather than a framework. But then we redirected ourselves towards the CMS direction. Indeed, you can just use a user-friendly admin panel, create your content architecture, and you'll have APIs out of the box, which you can access in the files, customize them directly in the files. It gives a lot of freedom. It speeds the development for the developers. So that's how the backend is being done from my technical understanding. Ryan, maybe you will add something more.
No, you actually hit on one of our keywords. Well, okay, so I'll say this. If I could offer the things that make Drupal commerce unique as software as a service, I would. But it's not often possible because the things that make us unique, Drupal unique in general, are having full and total control of your entire data model, your data architecture, being able to customize the resources that are actually exposed through your API. And that cannot be easily SaaSified. In fact, Drupal companies have tried and Deadpooled. They're sort of turnkey site builders and other things like that. So there's much to be said for the simplicity, certainly for the scalability, and if you're a venture capital fund, I mean the revenue and value potential behind the SaaS platform. But, and this is where the other shoe drops, is like, but we believe at Centarro in a future where anyone who wants to sell online can compete without compromising their ambitions, software freedoms, or consumer privacy rights. And most SaaS platforms in the world are forcing you to compromise on all three. We might remember the big split between MailChimp and Shopify. You can argue which camp was the aggressor, which one was in the right there, but essentially MailChimp was booted from the Shopify app store for their official app because they were refusing to hand over all of their merchants' data to Shopify. In other words, like mailing list information, segmentation, data that they've collected through other channels. Shopify was saying, if you want to be a part of our ecosystem at all, then you have to give us everything. and because they refused to play, they got the boot, and now the merchants suffer, and they all moved on to Klaviyo or other things. The other people who are willing to go along with the compromising. But it's deeper than just privacy, because it's also, what about your ambitions, your growth ambitions? So again, my friend Eric Banholtz that runs Beard Brand, not a customer. I just like him. He's from the area. I met him in a Starbucks. I talk to anything that breathes, anything with a pulse, I'll introduce myself to. And so he was trying to expand to Europe. Well, his only option with Shopify was to open up a whole separate Shopify store. So he had one Shopify account for the US, one Shopify for the UK. And if you wanted to go to more markets, tough, right? With Drupal, not a problem. You own the backend. You can just add an additional domain. You can translate it if you need to. You can convert the currency if you need to. Like you have more ability to kind of bring your ambition to life. And a great, like go back to Rob, your sort of framing was like the frothy waters of SaaS headless commerce investments. Does anybody remember Reaction Commerce? Is that familiar? Reaction Commerce. Okay. Big splash, big investment, React Native, e-commerce backend, headless, blah, blah, blah. I remember when they first went, I was like, man, we do this stuff. And I looked at their documentation. You couldn't do multi-currency. I'm like, well, who in the world launches an e-commerce platform today that can't do multi-currency? And maybe they've fixed that since then, but you know where Reaction Commerce is today? Well, MailChimp bought them because they failed. Like that's what happens, right? Like you get the frothy waters, but a lot of investments, like you said, Rob, and the ones that aren't going to make it, they've already failed out and been bought up by people who needed some kind of e-commerce play. That's not the first e-commerce platform that MailChimp has bought. MailChimp is trying to be an all-in-one marketing solution. Well, so they've got to buy up an e-commerce platform if they can't rock a partnership that's good for them. And so the problem here, inherent in the SaaS model, is it's less performant in terms of like functionality, and you're tied to the vendor's roadmap. And guess what? If you went long on Reaction Commerce when they first launched, and then you saw them get bought up by MailChimp, well, suddenly you're going to have to rethink your strategy around MailChimp's roadmap or undergo a costly platform migration. Even in the Drupal space, you saw this, just partnerships like this are tough, right? Like, I'm very friendly with Acquia, with a lot of people at Acquia. Obviously, they're huge Drupal sponsors, and they had like kind of a close integration with Magento for some time. And that was their e-commerce strategy, was you pair up your Drupal with your Magento. You have Drupal 8 as a front end, Magento as the back end, doing some headless things, and then maybe redirecting to checkout on the Magento stack. Well, lo and behold, Magento gets bought up by one of Acquia's biggest, most hostile competitors. What's going to happen to everyone that Acquia sold on put your Magento beside your Drupal? Well, Adobe's going to say, well, you don't actually need a Drupal. You can just use an Adobe Experience Manager. And it's tough. Like we don't want people to be forced to have to acquiesce to those kinds of market movements. With open source, you actually can own it, but you still have the cost, right? Like SaaS simplifies the cost of ownership because it just boils it down to a monthly fee, maybe with some sort of rate limitation, we're like price points, or maybe with, a lot of models, a percentage transaction fee. So it simplifies some of that, but I think there's long-term hidden costs that just don't get discussed as much. And then finally, and I'll yield the mic. Sorry for talking for like 5 minutes straight here. Like, I think that, again, if I could sassify what makes Drupal commerce unique, I could retire next year, because like the use cases that we serve, that my company directly serves, are just hard. And there is no SaaS platform that can just do it, right? I'm talking about, somebody that wants to do B2C plus B2B in one platform with a loyalty program that offers some separate pricing tiers. And oh yeah, it looks one way in Germany and a different way in Sweden. And we transact in at least 10 different currencies. And we need to be able to support consumer financing in the US, but not in, it's once you start to intersect these multis, I guess, this is kind of how I talk to folks about it. It's like, well, you might be able to find a multi-currency SaaS platform. Cool. Can you find a multi-customer flow platform that does multi-currency and B2B plus B2C all in one? Maybe so. BigCommerce says they can. I've looked into it. I think that their priceless functionality is pretty rudimentary. I don't think it's going to get you where you want to go, but maybe you can. Okay, multilingual content management along with that. Like you start to pair up all these, multi-domain, eventually you come to a point where the only thing that you can do is build your own, but you don't have to build from scratch. And that's where like Drupal commerce then becomes very attractive. It's people that want to either build that private content plus commerce cloud, or want to build this one system that maybe it's monolithic in terms of warehousing all of the data and interrelating it, but it still has an API so that all of the different front-end consumers aren't monolithic. They can kind of have some agility at the front end. Anyways, that's what I'm thinking. What we're trying, what we're doing, who we're serving.
What was the question?
Yeah.
No, that's fine. I actually have a question for both of you, but I think Anastasia gets first dibs on it. So we've been talking about headless. It's kind of the title of the show, but maybe the headless is the passe part. Maybe that's the okay, that's just an implementation detail to serve some use cases, and maybe it's overall the future, but it's going to be like so many other things. It'll be part of the future, but not all of the future, and it's already there. So why are we even talking about it? What is the big story in e-commerce? What's coming up? Well, just put on your, future vision goggles, Anastasia. If you had to bet on some trend or some unexplored niche in the market, what would you say? And I know we didn't prepare for this. You don't have an answer written down. This is totally on the spot. Go.
Well, I've already spoken about the Jamstack commerce, which I think separates even more things apart and gives developer like the constructor experience of using different models. And talking about the CMSs themselves, I think this is something one of our co-founders recently spoke about atomic content, being able to really combine small parts however you want it, and being able to build things on the fly. But it's hard to make predictions like this, serving content to flying cars and refrigerators. This is already possible with Headless E-Commerce. Yeah.
Nice. I liked the flying cars part. You had me at flying cars.
I can't wait.
Right? How about you, Ryan? Where do you see the future going? Are there unexplored, undiscovered, undeveloped markets that we shall be looking at?
All right. There's the obvious trend, right, which is B2B commerce catching up with B2C. So both B2C customer experiences and administrator experiences coming around to catch up to what's happening in direct consumer and other B2C stores. I was just on the phone this morning with a company that owns around 8 or a dozen or so different outdoor brands. And we're only engaged with them to help them improve their B2C customer experience. But while I'm talking to them, they say, oh, we were talking about payment options. And we were talking about Braintree, which is one of our payment partners. We love them and love getting kind of an all-in-one solution from them, especially for Apple Pay via the mobile mobile Safari SDK. So in browser Apple Pay support. Not everybody does that. But while we're talking to them, my ears perked up when he said, oh, you know what? Braintree, we know about them because our ERP gives us a B2B purchasing platform that already uses a Braintree account or whatever. And it's like, wait a minute, like how we're having a conversation about the future of your commerce strategy, and their existing digital agency hadn't even brought up, do you do anything for B2B? And that's interesting, right? Like there's an opportunity. And it's really like in various other areas that we have, half of our customers doing at least some combination of B2C and B2B, but some that are just exclusively B2B. And the advantage of going headless with your commerce backend or your content backend is that we don't have to require them to re-platform their sites, right? Like they might just have an old portal, and they to re-platform that portal, to move from Expression Engine to Drupal or to a React Native app, like that may be off the table. But if they can just drop in an e-commerce platform that's fast and functional and does what they need, and then gives them an attractive checkout flow because we embed the iframe and whatever they got, like it's interesting for them, and it's starting to expand their understanding of, well, what can I do with e-commerce if I can just embed it into what I've already got going on, and hopefully eventually they'll get off the legacy platforms as well. But for me, I think like if I could pick a trend, a future trend, it's privacy. And how does headless tie into privacy? I feel like the advantage of monolithic full stack applications in the past has been you just know everything about what's happening on your site, right? Like I got my server logs. I can audit my server logs down to the IP address detail. I can build this cool, awesome, huge profile. I can add what's the one? Hotjar? Is that what lets you spy on people while they're navigating your website? Yeah, like there's all kinds of spyware that you can put on websites right now, right? To see exactly what people are doing. I mean, like, and thinking about, you can engage, right? It's stuff that, like, it's innocuous when it's presented as improve the customer experience, but it is spying, right? Like it actually is spyware. It's like the literal definition of spyware. You're able to see exactly what somebody's hovering over or entering in a search box while they're doing it. And I think that, especially with the way that the big platforms are going, with the way that deplatforming happens, with the way that governments restrict your ability to purchase things like cannabis-derived products online, like privacy and the ability to just like protect your own software freedoms and your consumer privacy rights, like I think that's always going to be a concern. And so that's where like our forays into the healthcare sector, I think, makes sense, right? Like, you just don't think about healthcare doing a lot of direct consumer e-commerce, but maybe the reason they haven't really prioritized it is because they can't ensure their consumers' privacy rights on any of the existing platforms. I've talked with people that can't use Salesforce Commerce Cloud or Shopify because of their requirements around PII and HIPAA. And so I think, the advantage of a platform that says, look, we're a commerce engine, or we're a content engine, Strapi, and you're going to consume data from us over an API. We won't know anything at all about your end user if you don't want us to know it. Like that's a competitive advantage. Like you can get that content, you can transact, and we don't have to know anything at all about it. We just have to facilitate money moving from point A to point B, or content moving from this data store into that that browser, and Google doesn't have to know about it. Hotjar doesn't have to look over the shoulder. I think that's kind of like a perpetual trend. Maybe it's and it's prioritized at different points, at different times. But I think that, even just look at what's happening in crypto. Like, I don't talk a whole lot about crypto because I don't think it's practical for most merchants and customers. But why is it big? Privacy. You can't be deplatformed. You can't have your assets frozen. Oh, I guess you always can, but or you can lose your key fob and lose. You can lose your wallet. Exactly. That's why I'm long on Bitcoin. It's not because I really care about it, but I just think that people are going to continue to lose their wallets, so the supply is just going to get ever smaller. But anyways, I think that's an interesting trend, and something that going headless does facilitate, but maybe not something that people really think about first when they think about it.
So I wanted to thank you both for not just coming out with NFTs as the answer, non-fungible tokens are what everybody talks about now, and that would have taken us directly into the crypto sphere, where I don't want to go. It's a totally different conversation. It's a legit
just because you
conversation.
can doesn't mean you should.
It's a very interesting space. I wanted to actually talk about the anti-privacy channels. Okay, there was an acquaintance of mine has just launched a company that is, I think, I haven't had a chance to talk to her about it. I wanted her to be on the show today. Maybe she'll come on a different show. But I think the motivation was, how can we do what Instagram stores and Facebook stores have done for those for TikTok? Right, because there's not a TikTok store, and what as a person who occasionally tries to sell things myself, mostly like music and albums. What I see out there is that the place to sell stuff now is on a social media platform where there's a taste setter that you've chosen. We call them influencers because you allow them to have influence over you by like following them and liking their content. That you allow them to influence your decisions on what to buy, and they've become like a focus point for product promotion and all sorts of things, really. But Ryan, you should look into, Centarro influencers on TikTok. I think it's really going to hit your market. Do you guys see a lot of this like influencer-led marketing coming in through the front door when you talk to your customers? Are they concerned about that? Because we're talking about systems that go and build websites, right? You know, Strapi and Centarro, you guys build websites of various sorts. Headless is just an implementation detail. Whereas like there's, in my opinion, in observation, there's this huge still ongoing sucking sound where everything's leaving websites and all going to TikTok. Do you see that too?
Well, I haven't heard about such use cases yet, but I agree about the general trend. It feels like everything is happening through social media and TikTok.
Yeah, which is where that reactionary play comes in even. I mean, so you can either lean into it or you can do what Signal has done. Did either of you see the Signal post yesterday? That was so clever, right? Where they said, we're just going to run an advertisement campaign that shows you exactly how much this platform that you're on knows about you. But at the same time, I have bought stuff off of Instagram. Literally, like I have a stupid T-shirt that I bought because I was like, oh, that's so clever. And it was just a surfing T-shirt of Paul Atreides on top of a sandworm on Dune. Anyways, Arrakis. There we go. Anyway, but. What's happening there? Our customers haven't really talked to us about it. The only thing we've had to do is help them survive the burst of traffic that comes whenever one of their influencers does promote their product. So, for example, I used to work with one of the big 3 record labels here in the US, and every time one of their recording artists would drop a new T-shirt in their Instagram feed, they needed to survive the blast of traffic, which really just took a little bit of database optimization. Make sure you set your transaction isolation level, folks. If you're in Drupal here, read committed. But that was all about social driving traffic to the store. I don't have as much experience with stuff happening directly in the stream or in the feed. All I know is my daughter says I don't keep up with tween stuff. That's all I know about TikTok. Apparently it's full of tween stuff and funny dances, and I'm just out of the loop.
I admit to being the same, and although my son loves to chew on my iPhone, he's not yet figured out how to follow people yet. So he's quick, 10 months old, and he's he can hang up on grammar really well, but I'm not looking forward to having to navigate the 15 to 18 years out aspect of social media. I'm like in my 70s, right? Like, oh, son, what's that you're looking at there? With your virtual reality goggles, or like maybe he'll just be zoned off because he'll have that brain implant, right? Like the TikTok brain implant. Daddy, it's great. You ought to try it now.
No. Crib grab. It's the latest crib grab. Haven't you watched it yet? Like you can taste what that person is tasting right now. Here, put on this headset.
Oh wow, my God, that would be Terrifying.
I would do that. I would be such an influencer on that platform. I mean, I will eat anything.
Yeah, I saw your dare when you ate the
Oh, the
hot
Carolina
chilies.
Reaper video. Yeah.
Oh goodness, I will not virtual reality your tongue. Sorry.
Oh man. Well, you can VR my tongue if you want, Rob.
All right, the show is getting silly. That means it's time to end. We're coming up to the top of the hour. Unless there are any more questions from the audience right now, I'm going to say thank you very much to my very insightful and thoughtful guests, Anastasia and Ryan. Thanks for joining today. This will, persist on YouTube forever and ever, and it also comes out later as a podcast on Spotify. Look for it there. And join us next week for yet another fun episode of Deploy Friday. Thanks, everybody. Take care. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.